Donald Sutherland's emotionally remote father, Mary Tyler Moore's absolutely vicious mother, who is both the villain of the film and dealing with horrendous grief.
It's the movie.
And Timothy Hutton as just a totally lost teenager.
And then Judd Hirsch wearing the greatest sweaters in cinema history. Fuck off Chris Evans in Knives Out.
Yeah.
This is the best knitwear you're ever going to find.
Hello and welcome to Expected Own Goals. Put the emphasis on the poor in Portland edition. I am your host, Eric Morgan.
And I'm Evan Davis. This is our first semifinal preview for the NWSL playoffs, talking about Washington's 2-0 beatdown of the Portland Thorns to send them to their second straight NWSL championship.
Let's start right at the top. Were Portland bad or were Washington incredible?
I lean probably more toward the latter.
I think Portland didn't have any sort of tactical plan to deal with what Washington threw at them. And maybe they didn't have the personnel to deal with it either, but they really were overwhelmed from start to finish. And I thought Adrian Gonzalez got his tactics about as right as any coach has gotten their tactics. And Rob Gale really didn't have any ability to adjust.
The calculation that Adrian Gonzalez made was that there was really no point in trying to stretch play, because if we overload numbers in the center, they're not going to be able to handle it, and their fullbacks can't hit us out in transition. And they just stayed front foot basically from wire to wire. There was not really a point at which Portland ever had an opportunity for a field tilt advantage. They had 3 players whose average touch spot were in the attacking half. 2 of whom were Olivia Moultrie and Jessie Fleming, rather than, your 3 forwards. Which tells you, I think, what the real story of the game is. It's the personnel. Like, even Rob Gale mentioned it in the post-game presser. Like, he just had no forwards to put on the field in his final sub window because none of them were healthy. You might argue that, like, maybe Pietra Torden needed to start, even if it's like a fitness issue that has been,
I think that's fair,
keeping her out of the 11, and that is the story. Then you say, okay, that's fine. And she got into the game, but there was nobody after her.
Yeah,
and we knew this, by the way, in our preview of this game. Yeah. We knew that this was going to be a central cause of concern for Gale and the Thorns.
So Diane comes on for Raylan Turner, down a goal, chasing the game, and that tells you everything you need to know about how depleted Portland's bench is.
Yeah, and maybe you say, should Turner have stayed on, and you go like something a little bit more like for like, especially because you shouldn't be thinking about like shoring up your defensive options here. I mean, in a way, maybe Gale could say he was proven right.
What are you defending for?
Right, and maybe Gale in his own way would say that he was proven right because a minute later they got carved open
on a terrible back pass.
Yeah. And with everybody pushed ahead, and that exposed them. But also, like, 1-0 down, 2-0 down, who cares? You're still going home. So, like, leave all your weapons out. Now, maybe Turner was just gassed and she couldn't keep going, but I don't know.
I think the thing that gets underrated is there is no harder game for a striker, or for many types of striker, than the game that Raylan Turner was facing, which is you are in isolation, you are pressing all the time, you are coming deep to get the ball, to get yourself involved in the game. Right. It's as much running as a striker is ever going to have to do, and almost all of it is fruitless. And I think that the mental aspect of just like chasing lost causes for 80 minutes, you just can get exhausted in a way you wouldn't in a game that is more balanced.
Yeah, and the isolated part is probably the operative thing to drill down on, because she was the one forward that got to stay up a little bit. Meanwhile, Dana Castellanos and Alexis Panstra are full on just like joining the midfield to try and slow anything that Washington is doing down. And
both not particularly effectively.
No, not especially. Although it is interesting that, like, basically Washington had 3 big chances. They scored 2 of them, but otherwise it's a fairly quiet performance from them. It's a controlled performance. Again, it's them pressing and spending a lot of time in the final third, but they're not necessarily like generating good chance after good chance after good chance. They didn't need to for a good chunk of it because they score early enough, and that probably dictates some of that attitude. But it's not as though like Washington just absolutely went and like ripped Portland apart when you kind of step back from those three moments, the 2 goals plus the Cantore chance in the 69th.
There is one version of explaining this game away to yourself if you're a Portland supporter that says, look, we gave away 2 big breaks. One was an inexcusable counterattack off our own corner, and the other was a horrendous back pass that's kind of a freak event.
Yeah.
And that is fair, but also Washington was going to, given the volume of possession, get at you one way or another. There's a Gift Monday chance that may or may not have been offside. We would love some automated technology to sort of, to really get at whether she was or wasn't. And the Gift Monday goal that gets chalked off, that's from inches out as well.
Yeah, right.
Washington found themselves 3 separate opportunities through this game where they had tap-ins, and they tapped in 2 of them.
Yeah, and it all kind of ends up getting tied in together, right? Like, you take out those 2 goals from Washington, and their attack maybe looks a little bit less like scintillating.
Subdued,
But everything that they were doing was also ensuring that Portland never had a legitimate opportunity to begin with. 0.3 XG, 0.0 XG per shot. No quality chances on the day. It was an absolutely anemic performance.
What I would accept as a narrative is if you want to break this game down into 2 semi-individual errors deciding the game, the first individual error being Caitlin Torpey not leveling Rose Kouassi on the counterattack and stopping that run. Having now rewatched it a number of times, I'm not sure Torpey didn't try to like take her out and hit a sideboard. But the only way you're stopping that break is 70 yards from goal. It was Ryan Rosenblatt who said Kouassi is faster with the ball
than Portland is without it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you watch, and it's just like Jesse Fleming chugging away, losing ground to Rose Kouassi.
Not a player known for her mobility or athleticism to begin with, and probably shouldn't be in that situation at all. Not the player you want to try and slow Kouassi down. But it's also like Kouassi's touch to like break away from the touchline where she then can get space is like, it's a reminder that this Washington always was going to be the better team, always had the like higher levels of talent on show. And the question was just going to be, could they execute? And they executed. They took advantage of the things that weren't in control presented to them, i.e. Portland's personnel situation, and then just ratcheted up to 11. Like, you gotta, yes, maybe those are 2 big mistakes by Portland that don't reflect their true talent, but Washington were good enough to take advantage of them in ways that other teams probably couldn't have.
Yeah, I think one of the best players in the league had one of her best games in a Spirit uniform is the Rosamond Kouassi story here in this game. Yeah. And her game is so much built around the ability in open space when you have the chance to get there to be utterly dominant, and she was. It says everything you need to know about sort of the oddness of corner marking, that it is Alexa Spanstra making the last-ditch tackle on Gift Monday to try to stop that. That is not the player you want trying to save a goal line chance. So not only was this elite counterattacking from Washington, but it was not Portland's best defenders back to handle it.
Yeah.
So this is a train wreck on a train wreck. It reminded me of like peak Liverpool, Mo Salah, Alisson Becker level counterattacking. Rosamond Kouassi might be the fastest player in the league. She's right there with Temwa.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, we don't have publicly available like actual, speed data on players, but it sure as hell looked like it.
Yeah, and the craziest thing is once she got going, she looked like she was running at about 85% and everybody else was at 100 trying to catch back, which allows her to play a really well-timed ball across to Monday. Another act of selflessness. There are so many attackers who would have tried to take that chance on and just not either looked for or expected this sort of trailing run of Monday. But Rosamond Kouassi heads up play. And I really do think Portland never creates anything in this game that threatens from there on out.
No, and if you want to, as a Thorns fan, find the defense in that it's just a couple of mistakes, well, also, may I point you to like the Cantore chance in the 69th minute, which comes from genuinely getting carved up by Washington in transition, and you're only bailed out by the fact that Cantore has to receive at kind of a too tight an angle and has to immediately snatch the shot off, so it ends up going wide. But that also was indicative of like how easily Portland could be exposed. It was I mean, do you find it was a strange, like an unusual performance from Portland, with the caveat of all the personnel stuff that we've already talked about? Like, we've become so used to what these playoffs are offering, and also what we probably have had to acknowledge, like, have been the NWSL playoffs in aggregate over the last few years, which is like games get tighter because it's knockout football and you're not going to take as many risks. This was as like one way open a game as we have seen in quite some time.
Unusually unbalanced for a playoff game.
Yeah.
And for me, I actually think the core element of that is how much defensive work rate Washington got out of their zoom, vroom, vroom midfield.
Yeah.
And first off, Hal Hirschfeld has one of her best games as a Spirit player, full stop. Mm-hmm. They won that midfield battle. They got a lot of contribution from their back line to jam numbers up. They played a relatively high line at times.
Yeah.
There was not a lot of space for Portland to cut through. There was not a lot of time for Portland to have on the ball. Hirschfeld is incredible, but Santos and Bethune were doing like heavy lifting in there as well.
I mean,
and Washington plays like at times pretty narrow, which again limits Portland's space and forces Portland out of whatever shape they were attempting.
And they didn't have the width to try and punish Washington for playing that way. And Washington didn't feel under threat at all to like have the game get slowed down while they were trying to like punch a bunch of numbers through central channels.
I can imagine a game where if Portland has a healthy M.A. Vignola, things look a little different.
Maybe, but that's
because it would have realigned everything. But again, that's a thing that wasn't available to them.
And again, speaks to how Gonzalez and his players managed to take advantage of Portland's personnel problems. I mean, when you talk about Bethune's work rate, like Bethune's goal comes from the fact.
From pure pressing from the front.
Exactly. And grabbing that mistake. And then once again, talking about taking advantage of what's in front of you, forcing Mackenzie Arnold into the places she does not want to be.
Yeah. I think if you're looking for a single image of the game to express the Portland performance, it is Mackenzie Arnold, her disgust at getting beat by Bethune to the ball on a terrible back pass, being stranded, and just sort of like knowing that that's it. It's Mackenzie Arnold's like ultimate frustration. She had herself a game.
She was very
incredible.
Good. Yeah.
She was incredible. And on another day where you don't give away two horrendous chances like that, we talk about this as one of like the all-time great playoff goalkeeping performances. Like if Portland finds a leveler and Washington doesn't find that second goal, Mackenzie Arnold is being lifted on shoulders through the streets level performance.
Yeah, but it is also an expression of like the duality of Mackenzie Arnold, right? Like I am a world-class shot stopper, but if you ask me to like step anywhere outside of my 6-yard area, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
You know?
And that was particularly when chasing the game asked of her.
Yeah.
And that is a problem. If I want to highlight other individual performances, I mean, Kwasi was incredible. I thought McKeown had a really good game. We got a fair amount out of Kate Wiesner, which was a nice little surprise.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there was a performance from Washington that I thought was actively not good.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think there's too much to argue about there other than maybe like, you know, Contore didn't get a couple of like high value passes off, but it didn't matter because again, Portland just was not ever going to be capable of threatening and punishing any mistakes that Washington might have made.
Yeah. And look, on the peripheral elements of playing on the road in that environment certainly didn't help Portland. But I also think this is a game of personnel.
And also we should acknowledge an own goal from our preview last week, which was that we emphasized that, you know, traveling 3,000 miles in 3 time zones might actually have a negative effect on Portland. But, you know, you scratch the surface a little bit on like the data on home field advantage and travel. It doesn't really matter when you have more than like 3 days in between games.
It seems like all the noise here comes from European away fixtures where you're traveling midweek to play Champions League games. That's where you start seeing, or like 3-day turnarounds. That's where you start seeing the effect.
Yeah, but like if you're traveling from Portland to DC and then you have 5 days to be in DC, or even if you travel the night before and you still have like 5 days between games, there's no added hit you take the more miles you have to travel. The important part of it is always it's an away game. And specifically, it's an away game where you are playing in front of a massive, rabid sellout crowd that might get in the officials' heads.
Yeah, and in this particular instance, the officiating was not a big part of the game other than the goal that was chalked off.
And it didn't have to be.
And it did not have to be, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, bing, bang, boom. Washington never really seemed like they had to break a sweat throughout any of this. I mean, they didn't even need to, like, break glass on Trinity Rodman again until garbage time minutes and stoppage time just to keep her loose, essentially.
We find ourselves like with not a lot to break down in this game because it was such one-way traffic.
Yeah.
Like there, you could talk about how Olivia Moultrie was taken out of the game or how Sam Coffey was taken out of the game. But I really think it comes down to just like position by position, Washington was healthier and more talented, and you just kind of can't make up that talent deficit even with your stars at that point. Yeah. Like the combined 11 probably only features 2 Portland players.
Yeah, a couple of bad moments of misfortune were Portland's only hope here, and they just didn't get him.
And they didn't get him.
So yeah, that's it.
That literally is it for them on the season. Let's talk briefly before we get to the Rodman of it all. Let's talk just high-level thoughts on Portland's season, all things considered.
I find the small coach of the year discourse that people had last week pretty tedious because it's the dumbest and the silliest award. There's no way for you to be able to really correctly judge like which coach had the most positive impact on their players. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that our best available research indicates that coaches have much less of an effect on their team's performances than we like to assume.
Yeah, basically little to none.
But
I mean, that's a crazy statement, but there's a fair amount of data to back up that the best coaches are worth like 6 points a year.
Yeah. And there's a really good article that John Mueller wrote in The Athletic a couple of years ago where the first 500 words of it are just quotes from what we would consider the best head coaches in the world saying like, yeah, it's not really what I do. It's what the players do. So, you know, if the coaches themselves are saying that. But if you want to accept the argument, as Beviana's partisans have, that she did the most with the least and improved her team's preseason prospects by the most, if that's your rubric, then your candidate is actually Rob Gale. I want to be clear. That's not me saying that Rob Gale was a good coach or is a better coach than Beviana is. What it is saying is that if your metric is
overperformance against expectations
with a depleted roster, then Gale is the candidate for that particular argument. They ended up beating their preseason points projections by the largest margin for any team not named Kansas City. And that goes both by the raw results and by the underlying performances. And think about the players that were not available for Portland all year. Sophia Wilson, Morgan Weaver. You didn't have Julie Dufour the moment you got her. You know,
Marie Mueller, who was quietly one of the better fullbacks in the league last year.
That's right.
Nicole Payne, whatever you think, losing both of your fullbacks preseason is devastating.
That's right.
Portland had a lot to contend with.
Yeah, and to whip up a lineup that you then lose what was emerging as a key piece, Kaya Hanks, in the middle of the season, and still manage to get to third place, albeit in a very parity-driven mid-section of the table. You still got the team still ended up in third place. Then they're probably in okay shape. I mean, because you get Weaver and Wilson back, you probably won't get Hanks back for the beginning of the year. But then all of a sudden your attack is looking deep, wherein it was so bereft of talent at the end of the playoffs. And then you still have the Coffey, Fleming, Moultrie midfield. And, you know, you probably want to find some backline depth to bolster things. But if, you know, Lisa Bethel-Mirage and Jeff Agos are ready to open up the checkbook, they can go get those pieces in the offseason, and they will be a competitive playoff team again, if not a Shield contender.
Yeah, I think that's the thing for me, which is to say Portland was both not as good as the 3 seed they ended up with and also a complete surprise. And for long stretches of this season, a real delight.
Yeah.
For me, the narrative here is coming into this season, Olivia Moultrie looked like she had regressed a little bit, and we did not know what Olivia Moultrie we would end up with. 2024's Olivia Moultrie was concerning.
Yeah.
And this year, It took a minute, but they found the right way to use her. And 2025's Olivia Moultrie is one of the best players in the league. Sam Coffey, with all of the pressure and all of the turnover, was handed the keys to the car as far as leadership in this team is concerned. I mean, you think about like losing Becky Sauerbrunn and Christine Sinclair before the season is just from a pure leadership perspective.
Yeah.
And Sam Coffey put together what I think we agree is the midfielder of the year performance.
Yeah.
So when you have those two bright shining lights working for you, you can unlock a lot of other things.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of happened.
Yeah.
Between that and some really thoughtful acquisitions, even if Kaya Hanks and Julie Dufour both got injured, you had a lot of good business done. And when you think about what that attacking core looks like next year, assuming Sophia Wilson is back, which is
she will be.
Yeah. But whether she's in Portland or not, I think is a little less clear.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. But like, let's assume she's back in Portland. I think the likeliest outcome. Morgan Weaver will basically be coming back from 2 years of not playing. So who knows what you can expect out of Morgan Weaver. But let's assume she comes back healthy. You have what was already one of the best 1-2s in attack. And then you have Kaya Hanks, who will be coming back in recovery. You have Raylan Turner, who you can spell them with. You have Olivia Moultrie, who will be like the new Olivia Moultrie, new and improved, who will be doing all the distribution from the front for them.
And then you have Pietra Torden off the bench.
And then you have like low-key one of the best rookies of the year, Pietra Torden, coming off the bench, and also Julie Dufour.
Yeah.
It's an unbelievably stacked attack.
If you are a Portland fan, I hope that you are not too disheartened by this result. Like, nobody thought you were going to make an NWSL semifinal in 2025, and you did, and you did it on the back of two of the most electric midfield performances we saw from any team all year. And next year, you're stacked, and hopefully you have an ownership group ready to then supplement you with depth and potentially like really elite starting caliber backline talent. And then once you're there, you're back to being what people expect of Portland Thorns soccer.
Yeah, this is a pivotal offseason for them. We'll definitely do a breakdown when the season is over. But I think you could even endure the loss of a Sophia Wilson next year, given the amount of depth you have. Yeah. That really says something. Portland, on paper, if everyone comes back, rivals Kansas City for what they can do going forward and the number of different sort of dynamic things. So in this gap year, I think this is incredibly promising stuff. You know, we were joking last week about like Haley McCutcheon saying no one believed in us. Well, legitimately, no one believed in the Portland Thorns this year.
Yeah.
And I know that Sam Coffey took that personally, and correct. We had to re-record at the beginning of the season our preseason prediction. We initially all had them 5th along with Kim McCauley, or like right around there. When they lost Wilson and Weaver, we came back. We had them 12th-ish collectively, and they finished 3rd. Yeah. So own goal us. We didn't believe. Maybe you weren't as good as 3rd, but you still surprised us in all the best ways.
Yeah. So, yeah, brighter days are ahead for Portland. Do not worry about that.
Well, let's also talk before we go about the Trinity Rodman of it all. So news dropped at what I would describe as, depending on your position, an opportune or inopportune time.
About 4 hours before kickoff.
About 4 hours before kickoff, basically stating that the NWSL's salary cap is potentially prohibitive for Trinity Rodman remaining either with the Washington Spirit or even just in the league.
And that the NWSL itself is stepping in to negotiate with her to try and keep her in the league. It's obviously very concerning for Spirit fans.
For sure.
It's very concerning for NWSL fans more generally. I mean, we've been saying this for a year and a half now. Like, she is the player that the NWSL needs to keep in order to maintain its level of global public relations presence. You know, I mean, she is the best or the second best or she's a top 5 player in the league. She's the best or the second best American player in the league. And she is 100% the most marketable player in the league. But she is not going to, she's not going to sign for under market value. And so if the Spirit really are up against the salary cap for 2026 and 2027, this is a really serious problem. And so what is a little bit frustrating to come out of this reporting is the moment of comment from Jessica Berman basically saying, you know, it's the salary cap that makes this the most competitive league in the world, and therefore it really shouldn't be.
Fuck off with that nonsense. I am so sorry. I don't mean to cut you off here, but the absolute off with that nonsense.
Yeah.
When we were discussing the new CBA, look, there is wiggle room. They can create a mechanism to keep her. That is possible.
Yeah. They also could enter into like emergency negotiations with Megan Burke and the players and just raise the salary cap.
Yeah. And by the way, this was my number one problem with the CBA when it got signed. It wasn't going up. It was never going to go up fast enough. It needed to be doubled, tripled,
and we knew that it was specifically Rodman's contract ending at the end of 2025 that was going to be the litmus test for whether this was going to work.
So two things. First off, Trinity Rodman absolutely deserves to be $1 million a year player in women's soccer. She is that good.
And that young.
And like, you know, for everything we said about Alyssa Thompson, Trinity Rodman is the end product of what Alyssa Thompson could become. Mm-hmm. And Alyssa Thompson is probably making $500,000 a year at Chelsea, maybe more. Yeah. And Trinity Rodman has already proved her value there. The NWSL should be concerned with keeping Trinity Rodman. Do I think the Washington Spirit should be concerned with keeping Trinity Rodman? Beyond the fact that, like, if they are able to financially or if a mechanism exists, yes, they should. But if the cap isn't adjusted, I actually think they've been so good at recruitment that they have, and they've also been without Rodman for long sections of this season. She played 1,100-ish minutes this year.
A little less, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit less. And that is a valuable chunk of time, but it is not dependably a chunk of time. She said before the season that she's going to be dealing with perpetual injury throughout the rest of her career. And the Washington Spirit, in finding Gift Monday and Rosamund Kouassi, have found significantly greater value and similar output other places. So, like, does it have the same value for a team that already sells out games, that doesn't need her in the starting lineup to be to get themselves to a championship? Is she surplus to requirements? Is she a player that you should keep should the salary cap not move? I think it's actually a lot closer than people think. I don't think it's essential for Washington to bring her back, given their ability to find talent. Do I think the league needs to keep her? I do.
Yeah, and I would maybe push back on that only in the sense of these issues kind of can't be separated. Like, it's kind of impossible to say, well, all else being equal, Washington doesn't need her.
They could absorb the loss of Trinity Rodman.
No, I get that, but like my point is that like there is a reason all of these negotiations are happening in the first place, because I think Washington also does recognize that there is some value to be gained by having Trinity Rodman in your squad. And
I'd be pissed if I was a Spirit fan or a member of the Spirit front office if we lost her.
Right. My point is, like, your argument is predicated on the idea that there will be no designated player rule and there will be no salary cap increase in the coming months.
Which is to say, the present situation.
Right. But we can't really speculate on that, because we are talking about all of this because there are people behind the scenes trying to prevent that from happening. You know, like there are forces trying to bring a designated player rule or potentially raising a salary cap to the NWSL immediately to make sure that this doesn't occur. And I say all of that because that is my assumption. If what the negotiations are behind the scenes are, hey, would you mind taking a below market contract so we can make this work? Well, that is going to be a non-starter, and those are not serious negotiations for this.
And more,
but I also don't know if that's what the league and the Spirit's position is either. So
I'll say, if that is the league's position, huge own goal.
Well, yeah, they deserve to like Rodman deserves to walk if that is the league's position. But again, I can't say that it is, and I am sure that like what Berman's comments reflect is that there is probably division among the owners about raising the cap or bringing in a DP rule, because I'm sure that Orlando and Kansas City and Angel City and Gotham and Bay and Washington would love a mechanism where they could potentially run their payroll to $5, $6, $7 million for next year,
if not more.
North Carolina, Louisville, Utah do not think that way, because we know that they don't spend money on their rosters, and they probably are more interested in suppressing labor and their earning potential in favor of like whatever meager return on investment they think they can get, which is always the most pathetic way that ownership can think, because they always sell these teams for 10 times what they paid for them.
Yeah,
So take the short-term loss, you idiots.
Like, fuck all the way off. Atlanta, I'm so glad we can work this in. Atlanta just awarded an expansion franchise for $165 million, which will be split between the current ownership. Fuck all the way off if you can't pay $5 million a year. You just got a massive windfall from allowing people into your cartel.
Yeah.
You have the money.
Yeah.
Every single one of these teams does have the capacity to pay a player $1 million a year, even if it's maybe a little financially ill-advised. What I was saying with Washington, of course, is that like few teams are better equipped to like
absorb
that loss.
For sure.
That said, Angel City, if I'm Angel City and like there's a mechanism by which I can just like unload a huge amount of money, I'm giving Trinity Rodman the world to bring her home.
Potentially. So all of this is a very uncomfortable situation that could have been prevented. But I also know that like these are also how labor negotiations go. Like there was a lot that the players won in the last deal, and they knew that they were going to have to probably budge on something. And unfortunately, it was this, that they did not get higher salary cap increases quicker or a DP rule locked in. They punted that at the expense of a bunch of other pretty significant victories. And if we get a salary cap increase or a DP rule anyway in the next couple of months,
they've won again.
They will have won again. And I think Berman, if she's smart, will realize that just because you're the most competitive league in the world, that might not always mean that you are the best or the most lucrative league in the world. You are right now, but that's because you have Trinity Rodman and Sophia Wilson, Mallory Swanson in your league, you know?
Mm-hmm. And a lot of other global talent that has established its dominance here too.
Exactly.
That said, Trinity Rodman deserves to be a top 5-ish, top 10-ish earner in this league. And that means the going market rate continues to climb aggressively here. Mm-hmm. And she should be paid. Again, I just can't emphasize enough. If you can pay a $5 million salary cap, like you can also pay a $15 million salary cap, given the media deal, given the renegotiation,
given the expansion fees,
that just dropped. Like all of these clubs just collected $10 million, just right there.
Right.
I mean, like there's some other dispersal that goes on, but let's just call it a big old chunk of change.
Yeah.
And it'll be a giant failure on the part of the league if Trinity Rodman is playing for Arsenal or Chelsea come January.
Or Lyon. Yeah.
Or Lyon. Even worse.
I completely agree, and I think it will do, if maybe not long-term harm, that's a more debatable question, but I think it will do short-term harm to the league's
it'll
prospects.
definitely hurt short-term. I actually agree with you. I don't think it'll necessarily, it's too many moving parts to say it'll do long-term harm.
Yeah, well, because we've also seen the last 3 off seasons, like the marketplace has just shifted and swung in so many different directions about bringing in high-value international transfers or keeping things close to home. Like, yeah, we don't know what like steadily emerging patterns are going to be in the long run, but this is going to be a problem for the next couple of years if you don't solve it, because the next Trinity Rodman might also feel compelled to leave because a team can't pay what she's worth.
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
That's the big question that Washington has got to think about off the field. On the field, they will be facing Gotham and San Jose on Saturday. Projection models make Gotham actually a slight favorite, which is a little surprising, but we'll dig more into that in our preview later this week.
Yeah. Also, things have changed over the course of each game week.
For sure.
And we will certainly be delivering no shortage of pre-match coverage. I'm not even going to ask you what you think this final is going to be.
No, we'll get there.
Other than to say one very good team in Washington has arrived.
Yeah, we will get there. In the meantime, tune into our second semifinal recap about Gotham's victory over Orlando in your feeds very soon. And check out our Patreon feed. All month, all of our Patreon episodes are unlocked behind the paywall, so you can check that stuff out. $6 a month gets you all exclusive bonus episodes, as well as the main feed, completely ad-free, both in video and audio versions. So click the link in the show notes to subscribe to Patreon today. If you are a fan of ours, we will be at Jack's in San Jose on Friday night.
Fun.
This coming Friday at 7 o'clock. We're going to be hanging out with the Bridge Brigade, the Bay FC supporter group. We're putting on a really cool event for fans, as well as the Spirit and the Gotham supporter groups who will be traveling for the game. So if you want to meet up with us in person, come hang out at Jack's in downtown San Jose on Friday night.
Yeah. Bye.